All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the roster cuts days and a little bit more news that went on like the last few days. I bet there's going to be some stuff that happens tomorrow that'll change things up, but I wanted to get this done now while I had my thoughts on the stuff that went down today. To start off, I'm going to go the big news and then go into some of the individual teams like alphabetically. Some of the teams I don't think anything happened with. So like, don't expect that, there's going to be like everything to talk about. Primarily it's going to be stuff that I find interesting. Don't know how much value that some people are going to get out of this, but we'll get down to it a little bit real fast. So CeeDee Lamb, 4 years, $136 million contract extension. This really moves Jake Ferguson up from a guy that I was getting a little squeamish on to like, okay, yeah, he's probably going to be the number 2 in that offense. I don't think this necessarily changes like your Jalen Tolberts or your like Brandon Cooks or anything. But now, like, if your drafts are coming up this weekend, like a real fantasy football league, should feel pretty good about like rolling out your CeeDee Lambs in that one. This should set the stage for like Ja'Marr Chase and Brandon Ayuk to get their contracts done to go along with it. So Ja'Marr Chase, like, I guess he is practicing now. He's expected to play week 1. Again, expecting the deal probably should get done pretty soon after this. Andre Iosivas goes from a guy that like I would have said prior to the CeeDee Lamb deal is a pretty good stash at the bottom of your leagues, and that's all leagues, to a guy that's like fringe draftability. Like, getting good pieces of good offenses is probably always a good idea. In this case, like, probably now looking to get like a wide receiver 3 dart throw more than anything else, with the expectation that the Ja'Marr Chase deal is going to get done. And then Jermaine Burton, everything I'm hearing is like he's having problems with the playbook. So like, wouldn't expect that he's going to really be a part of this, even if something goes down. And again, like I talked about, like the Brandon Ayuk deal, what I was hearing is that they shopped him, and basically all the other teams were giving him about the same amount of money that the 49ers were offering him. And then he just decided, like, I guess I'll go back to the 49ers. So again, with the CeeDee Lamb deal, expect that Ja'Marr Chase will get done, and then Brandon Ayuk, like, they already know what the money he's going to get is, so that deal should expect to get done. So if you're having your drafts this weekend or coming up here, like CeeDee Lamb should be relatively safe. I would say that like Brandon Ayuk is probably pretty safe, and then Ja'Marr Chase is pretty safe at this point. All right, other news like not expected. Jonathan Brooks, he went on the non-football injury list to start the season. It's basically like the pup, but for guys that didn't hurt themselves in football, and playing college football doesn't count. So anyway, 4 weeks at a minimum to start the season off. It did look like yesterday that he may have avoided this. So like, this looks like you're going to get like a shake and bake RB2 to start the season with Chuba. Miles Sanders didn't get cut, didn't get traded. Would not be surprised that this deal may not get done until after like Jonathan Brooks comes back to start off with. So TJ Hawkinson, this is another one like to be expected. He starts off the season on the pup, so you're looking at least 4 weeks. The surprise move on top of this, Robert Tonyan gets cut, so I have no idea. Josh Oliver's a blocking tight end, and the only other guy that I could really see right now is Nick Muse, that I don't really know anything about. So like, I would be surprised if the Vikings go into the season without a tight end. And this would slightly still elevate Jalen Nailor, with or without any news about Jordan Addison getting suspended. Did hear other things that like they are expecting. I shouldn't say they. Certain people on Twitter primarily, I've seen this post a couple times. They are expecting that like Drew Lock will eventually take the job from Daniel Jones this year. I don't know if that moves the needle on anything, but I did think that was kind of interesting if you're a little worried about like your Malik Neighbors here. So to get this out of the way, just for you guys that like want to get out of here at like the 4-minute mark, the guys that I'm tracking to be those like crazy breakout sleeper guys, still Jalen McMillan. I did see another tweet or Reddit post or whatever saying that like the insiders for the Buccaneers are saying that they would not be surprised if he outproduces Chris Godwin this year. And again, with Mike Evans being over the age apex, like, yeah, would be tracking him. So again, like fringe draftability in all leagues, I would say at this point. The other thing, and I'll talk a little bit more about this when we get down the line, but with the Jahan Dotson trade, like, yeah, doesn't really matter what anybody says about Luke McCaffrey. And I've watched tape on him, one of the few guys that I've like actually put a little bit of effort out on. Yeah, better than like say most of your wide receivers in the NFL right now. So like the fact of the matter is like 3rd-round draft capital, they don't really have anybody else on the roster. So a guy down the line maybe to end up in that wide receiver 2 range, maybe. I think it's a long shot. And then Malik Washington, we'll get to Odell Beckham here in a second, but like, yeah, he looks like he's going to be the wide receiver 3 for that Miami Dolphins offense. You know, Braxton Berrios would be the only other guy I would look at. 6th round draft pick out of Virginia. I did like him. So again, you know, with Tyreek Hill over the Apex, like how far could I push up Malik Washington? Like maybe, you know, the ceiling being like that wide receiver 2 type range if everything falls in the right direction. And then 6th round draft pick for the Falcons that I've been tracking, Casey Washington makes the roster. Again, like 6th round draft picks are guys that like, I think they have about a 30% chance of making the roster. So he makes the roster. Heavy usage in the heavy volume, it says right there. They did target him a lot in the preseason. Would not be surprised if he starts off as like the number 2 wide receiver in that offense, which would really mean that like he's probably something closer to like the number 4 or 5 in that overall offense. But again, like if you're looking for a guy to be like a crazy breakout, remember the Falcons are running the well, we're expecting the Falcons are running some type of the Rams offense. So like, yeah, meet Bobby Trees. So anyway, moving on, Elijah Mitchell for the 49ers, surprise a little bit, like he's on season-ending IR. So as far as I know, he's not coming back. Does open the door for Jordan Mason to be a cuff. I don't know how much I would expect that down the line that Jordan Mason is going to have that value to be rostering him or to, be drafting him even in deeper leagues, because, you know, if you're picking up CMC to begin with, you're not getting CMC if Jordan Mason comes back in. And then you just become an issue of like, well, how much does he push into that RB1 range if he does actually somehow inherit the backfield? And I would imagine that he's going to stay in some type of like limited RB2 land if there is that injury to CMC. Doesn't mean he's not valuable. I don't know how much I'd be wasting a roster spot. There's probably like guys, Blake Corum, that are going to have like a better shot of paying off as a lottery ticket. And then Cameron Latu, 3rd round draft pick last year, he gets cut. This is a little interesting. I don't know how much actual value it has with anything. It's just like a 3rd round draft pick that gets cut 2nd year in the league. All right, Bears. So Khalil Herbert doesn't get cut, which was not surprising, but didn't get traded yet. Now, does this mean that I don't think he's going to get traded? No. But right now, like everything that I've been hearing is the Bears are expecting to roll with him into the season. So, you know, if you're looking at a guy between like Jordan Mason and Khalil Herbert, who probably has more value if there's an injury, it's probably Khalil Herbert at this rate. I am expecting there to be a running back by committee that goes on. So like, you know, probably don't know how much you're going to be getting out of your DeAndre Swift shares, especially with Roshan. You're going to get that 3rd round down work with the Bears more likely pass blocking route. So moving on to Bucks, Chase Edmonds, he's going to start the season on IR, it looks like. So that means like Bucky Irving's a go to be some type of like change of pace back. Sean Tucker, undrafted last year, he stays on the roster. So like, I don't know necessarily if you do get that Rachaad White injury, if this is going to totally turn into the Bucky Irving show. So I don't know if I would necessarily be cuffing that down the line. And then how much Bucky Irving is going to eat into Rachaad White, like, you know, totally different skill sets, I think, between Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker at this point. Other thing is Devin Culp, really athletic tight end out of Washington, like 4.6 40 guy, or 4.4 40 guy, excuse me. He does make the roster. So like kind of a little bit interesting with some of the Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, you know, age decline that we can be potentially tracking, at Cade Otton being a little bit limited, like potentially having the ability to maybe eat into these guys. Probably less of a redraft issue and more of how much he's going to actually be used. Like, you know, there's only going to be so many targets to go around certain places out there. All right, moving on to the Broncos. So Samaje Perine does get cut. Not surprising. Where he lands is probably going to be a big deal. Probably is in that like volume-based RB2 type of role if he goes to the right place. Overall, like again, like guy who can catch the football, can thump in the goal line, and can pass block. So that's the interesting thing on that one. So this moves up like Osric Estime into that, like maybe he can become an RB2 range down the line. It does potentially move up Javonte Williams value a little bit. The guy that I would still be going after in this backfield is Jaleel McLaughlin, but like one less mouth to feed theoretically. So a little bit of surprise, like was tracking Tim Patrick to be the number 2 wide receiver in this offense. He gets cut. As it says, he's already been signed with the Lions. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So, like, your guess is as good as mine. Like, they signed Josh Reynolds coming over from the Lions. Maybe he's going to be the number 2 there. Devon Vele, he's 26 from Utah. 4.47 guy. I think that's what it said. maybe he's the guy who's going to have a shot to take that job. I don't think Marvin Mims or the 4th round draft pick out of Oregon, that's slipping my mind right now, are going to be the guys that end up taking the job for the Broncos right now. Like, it's going to be hard with Bo Nix to really go like, well, who's going to have a lot of value in this offense? If you're going to be chasing that in deeper leagues, like you're looking at like Greg Dolch or Lucas Kroll, like 4.6 40 guys. So like maybe there's a chance, a vacated opportunity coming out of the slot that you're going to get a guy that's going to be able to like be a magical dark horse tight end. I doubt it in this offense in general. I would be staying away from. The only guy that I would really be interested outside of Courtland Sutton again is Jaleel McLaughlin. Theoretically, to get the 2 things that I want, like design receiving work and red zone work. All right, surprise cut D'Onta Foreman. So I was talking about this last week after week 2, why he was playing. Well, we find out like they just didn't value him very much. So the only 2 guys on the roster right now are Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong. So this is an absolute boost to Jerome Ford shares going into the season. Like, I still think he's going to be rather capped. I don't know if this means that Pierre Strong is going to end up in that like RB2 role that Kareem Hunt had last year and get like the goal line usage. That would be the interesting part. Nick Chubb is going to start the season on the pup, so that's at least 4 weeks where you're probably looking at like pretty close to like bell cow usage right now. I would be really surprised if the Browns don't bring someone else in. The big news out of this is the Browns, they kept 4 quarterbacks on their active roster. And the news is that they're looking to ship Jameis Winston. So if they're trying to get a trade done at the quarterback position, then I would expect that they're going to pick somebody else up at the running back spot. If they go out and they like re-sign D'Onta Foreman, like maybe, but outside of that, like a little bit of some interesting stuff going on when it comes to the Browns and what they're going to do overall. All right, Cardinals. So they cut Michael Carter, and I was talking a little bit about this. Like, this definitely increases the value of your Trey Benson shares. Trey Benson is probably going to be the number 2 behind James Conner, but Amari DiMercado ends up staying there. So again, like I think there's a little bit of a ceiling to Trey Benson, even if James Conner does go down, because like there's a reason why they keep guys like this on the roster. It's because they're going to play special teams and they're going to do like the dirty work. So again, I don't necessarily mean that like Trey Benson is going to end up being a bell cow if James Conner goes down. It just means like at this point, like from last week to this week, like probably wouldn't have been drafting Trey Benson. And I think now he's a much better lottery ticket at this point. All right, Chargers. So J.K. Dobbins does make the roster, $50,000 guaranteed. So like this is not a surprise based off of the news that we were hearing in camp, but this is a little bit of surprise like from the offseason into camp going on. So Kamani Vidal, the 6th round draft pick out of Troy, like tracking to be the guy that's going to be quote unquote the league winner out of these guys. He does make the roster out of this one, but if there's a guy that you're going to be going after with that theoretical upside that's in draftability range right now, it's going to be J.K. Dobbins. Probably would be staying away from Gus Bus unless like I need some type of like set and forget RB2 to start the season off, and like Chuba Hubbard would probably interest me a little bit more on that one. So Donald Parham gets cut, and this gets a little bit more interesting for me because like now Will Disley jumps up, and a lot of other people have been talking about this, but I think that he does have some fringe interest down the line because theoretically the Chargers may be in a lot of 2 tight ends. Like Hayden Hurst makes the roster too. This is a little surprising. I think he only got paid like $1.2 million, and I don't even think any of that was guaranteed. So he makes the roster, and then converted quarterback Stone Smart, he makes the roster. These are guys that like I don't know outside of Disley, like Hurst and Smart, if I would say like they're blockers, and the Harbaugh offense, like some way, shape, or form was looking to be predictive to be like a heavy run offense. So the guy that I thought was going to make the roster is Zach Hines. He was undrafted out South Dakota State, 6'7", 260, like inline Y to go along with Disley. He doesn't make the roster, and then 7th round draft pick Brendan Rice does make the roster. So with DJ Chark there. And then Brendan Rice getting the start last week. Like, I don't think this has a lot of value from a redraft perspective, other than the fact that, like, if Ladd McConkey is not like the every down number 2 wide receiver, and they're trying to trot somebody else out there to go along with Josh Palmer, like this gets a little dicey on that one. I still think Ladd McConkey has a lot of value because of all the question marks that are out there to essentially lead the team in receiving. But because DJ Chark made the roster and Brendan Rice makes the roster, and he did start last week, it just makes me go like, well, like how much is Ladd McConkey going to have like every down appeal? And that's going to hurt a guy. Like if they're only going to be in that like two wide receiver set like 60-70% of the time, something like that. So this is just an interesting guy that did make the roster in my book. So the Chiefs, they did sign Juju. I don't think this really has much to do with fantasy, other than like some of the other moves that went on with this. So like Justin Ross didn't make the roster. I thought like maybe he had a chance to make that like last roster spot for wide receivers. They did cut Kadarius Toney. That would help your Isaiah Pacheco, but we're going to come back to that here in a second. They did trade for Peyton Hendershot. This gets a little interesting because Jared Wiley, the 4th round draft pick, theoretically could have been the heir apparent to Kelsey, and obviously he hasn't done enough to like make them want to just roll in with him and Noah Gray to start the season off. The other thing the Chiefs did, they cut Deneric Prince. Like, this is a camp height guy last year. He was running with the ones this year. This is a little interesting. Expect that he will eventually get signed on like their practice squad, I'm going to guess. But the other guy, like Carson Steele, he did make the roster. So we get like an upvote to Isaiah Pacheco because they cut Deneric Prince and they cut Kadarius Toney. This is a downvote when it comes to Isaiah Pacheco. Overall, I still don't think he's like, very strong player. Like you're looking at like running back 5 to running back 7, something along those lines. I think he's capped out, especially like a guy like Carson Steele, who I could see coming in and being in that like gadget role within the goal line. Other news, like I haven't heard anything about like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So like the 3 running backs that they're going to be rolling with are Pacheco, Clyde right now. Obviously he didn't go on IR. That was maybe being tracked about, and may have some injury illness type stuff going on with him, but Carson Steele makes the roster. So like, not going to be surprised that there's some type of role for him to start the season off. And then it just becomes an issue of like how much is going to eat into that theoretical ceiling for Pacheco. And again, I think Pacheco is a good punt. I think he's just really capped out. So unless you're in a spot where like that's the guy and there's that you like, or like you just want to punt and move on to the next round, like I don't know with Pacheco how he's going to win your league. So this is a couple things that I've been tracking, and there was a user or another a viewer comment about Michael Wiley. We'll talk about this. So Chris Rodriguez gets cut. This is the guy that I was maybe expecting him to turn this into a running back by committee. So it definitely does look like it's going to be Eckler and B-Rob. And then the other guy that may have been able to do this, undrafted free agent out of Arizona, Michael Wiley, that I did read about this after the viewer comment that they did like Michael Wiley in the passing game, and they did like him as a pass blocker, and he gets cut. So that's something to be like a little bit interested in to see what goes on with him down the line with the roster construction stuff. So they did trade Jahan Dotson. I said I was going to talk a little bit more about this. If Luke McCaffrey can't at least become the wide receiver 3 there, I don't know. Like he's too good from what I saw on tape for them to not at least give him a shot to go with their rookie quarterback. I don't see how he's going to be like. Right now we're tracking their starting wide receivers to be their number 2, number 3 wide receiver to be something along the line of De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zacharias, old man's Jamison Crowder, Byron Pringle. They did cut Martavius Bryant. So again, like the guy that maybe even at like 32 that I would have thought would have had the best chance to pair with Scary Terry after the Dotson trade, they cut him. So again, like I don't know who the number 2 and number 3 are going to be for the Redskins. They don't project to be very good. So like this is why I say like it doesn't matter what like the news is coming out on like Twitter or Reddit. Sometimes you just got to go like there's a vacated opportunity for a number 2 wide receiver for the Commanders, and if it ain't Luke McCaffrey, there's going to be someone walking in off the street when it comes to them. Now, other news out of this, like because of the stuff that's gone down with the Jahan Dotson trade, and then what the wide receiver room looks like definitely Zach Ertz has become like very fringe, and Ben Sinnott becomes very fringe because like again, just like some of the other teams out there that have these very limited wide receiver rooms, like the Broncos, they got to roll guys out to catch the football. And again, tight ends can help you in ways that wide receivers can, because there's only so many league winning tight ends as opposed to like all those wide receiver 3s that grow on trees. So in this case, like maybe the Redskins are going to roll out in a lot of 2 tight end sets. Like that would be what I would guess at this point based off of what their wide receiver room looks like. All right, the Cowboys. So earlier in the offseason, Jerry Jones said like maybe it's going to be a running back by committee. Well, they cut Royce Freeman, they cut Snoop Connor, and they cut Malik Davis. So now you're looking at like Zeke, Rico Dowdle, and Deuce Vaughn. And I think they cut Nathaniel Pete too. So Zeke, Rico Dowdle, Deuce Vaughn. If there's a league winner out of this group, it's going to be Rico Dowdle. The other news that I saw, and I don't know how much I would like really think this matters, but like Dalvin Cook, old man Dalvin Cook did show up in Dallas to have a meeting with them. So like at the very least, this opens the door because of they cut all their running backs for Dalvin Cook to potentially sign with the Cowboys. Again, I think that's still going to lead towards a running back by committee. If you want to throw your dart at Dalvin Cook, he didn't look very good last year, and I was watching him. He looks slow. So again, if there's a guy that I think has the ability to win a league out of this backfield, it's still going to be Rico Dowdle. But if Dalvin Cook shows up, I think it's just going to be a straight running back by committee, and I don't know how it wins you leagues. So Chris Brooks gets cut. Injury looks like on the line with the concussion. Jeff Wilson makes running back 4, which is a little surprising on this one. So again, like he probably does not have a lot of value. But again, like deeper leagues, maybe you're throwing your dart at Jalen Wright to be able to get what's left if old man Raheem Mostert or Devin Achane gets injured or something like that. But like Jeff Wilson still sticks around, which is a little surprising. Chris Brooks was playing special teams last year. That's why it's a little surprising to me. So the other thing is Odell Beckham goes on the pup, and right now, like if you're throwing a dart in deeper leagues, it's Malik Washington. They ain't got anybody else besides Braxton Berrios to end up playing the slot. So in this case, because of that story that we can tell, and I think Jalen Waddle is still a little nicked up. There's a lot of fringe value when it comes to Malik Washington, especially in deeper leagues, to at the very least become the wide receiver 2 in this offense because of old man Tyreek Hill and a little bit of that injury when it comes to Jalen Waddle coming out of this. So like I did like the guy. So if you're looking at a deep sleeper, like the story's there with the Odell Beckham pup. Was expecting Israel Abanikanda to get cut by the Jets. Didn't happen. Was expecting that maybe Zach Kuntz would be a guy. He's like, 6'8", 251 out of Old Dominion via Penn State. Ran, I think, a sub 4.640 at his size. So he gets cut. He was on the practice squad last year. He went up to the active roster. Would not be surprised he gets re-signed to the practice squad. But in this case, like Tyler Conklin, like ugly, deeper leagues, the guy that I would maybe be expecting that could theoretically become special athletically, not going to happen this year when it comes to the Jets overall. So like Garrett Wilson to the moon at this rate. Moving on to see, I think this is, I don't know why. Detroit. All right, this is Detroit. So they cut, the Lions did cut Donovan Peoples-Jones. So that was the guy I would be expecting to play that X, that clear out position. So what other guys were talking about is like, because they cut Donovan Peoples-Jones, this looks like it's going to be Jameson Williams season. On top of that, like does not profile to be with him and Amon-Ra St. Brown to be the 2 wide receivers and 2 wide receiver sets. So again, Tim Patrick coming in, he does join the practice squad. So I would expect that he's going to be the big X. He does run block. Yeah, he's going to be on the field like probably like 80, 90% of the time replacing Reynolds. So like this is going to keep Jameson Williams like in the 70% snap roll. I don't necessarily think that like it's going to change Jameson Williams when it comes to wide receiver 3 range, that boom bust wide receiver 3 range with a little bit of upside to maybe like flirt with wide receiver 2 land. But in general, like Tim Patrick coming in, I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant outside of wide receiver 3 land, but like it gives us an idea of probably what the lineup is going to look like for the Lions. So moving on, the Packers, AJ Dillon, he goes on IR. I think this is season ending with Stinger. So this is going to move Marshawn Lloyd up. So again, just like Trey Benson goes from like guys that I would not be drafting with your roster to, yeah, they're definitely lottery tickets at this point. Marshawn Lloyd probably moves up a little bit higher because I don't know who else they have on the roster at this point that I would expect to eat into Josh Jacobs. But this would move Josh Jacobs like really high up because some of the work that I would expect that he was going to lose out to AJ Dillon, he doesn't. So now you're looking at like wide receiver or running back type 5. So I would probably even move him up all the way up like to your second round of a lot of your drafts in that range, because he's going to be a guy attached to a good offense. He can pass block. He can run design routes downfield as a pass receiver, and he's going to get goal line usage. The guy that we were expecting to take some of the passing work out was AJ Dillon. Now, like Josh Jacobs, he's just a pure bell cow. The downside to him is a lot of usage and, athletically limited, but in general, like I do think this boosts Josh Jacobs up more than it would make me want to go out and get Marshawn Lloyd as a lottery ticket. All right, Patriots. So Kendrick Bourne is going to start the season on the pup because of his ACL. This is definitely like another sign that Jalen Polk is going to start the season as the starter there. So like he's another one of those guys. I don't think he's in that crazy breakout land because like he should be drafted in all leagues at this point. So, when we're looking at guys that like are probably not tracking to be drafted, Polk would not qualify in my book with when you're looking at like Jalen McMillan, Luke McCaffrey, Malik Washington, Casey Washington, even your going back here to like your Andre Yosivas. These guys should all be drafted. Or Yoshivas should be drafted in a way that Jolin Polk should also be drafted. So if you're looking at those crazy dart throws at the end of your draft, like Jolin Polk should not be that guy. And this is another sign that like he's not that guy. He should be like a deep dart throw, or he should be end of your bench to in all leagues at this point. Like even like 10-man leagues, he should probably be there, especially with Drake May tracking to potentially be the starter. The other one, Jaheim Bell, 7th round draft pick. He's another one of like the crazy athletic tight ends. Probably doesn't have a lot of value for redraft. It's just another guy that like 7th round draft pick makes the roster based off that athletic profile. So just a little bit interesting stuff that I find, especially with a very depleted wide receiver room when it comes to the Patriots on this one. All right, moving on the Rams. So interesting news today. Like Sean McVay says that Kyren Williams may be returning punts this season. This is just another thing. I don't take a lot of stock in it overall. It's another thing that makes me think that like the Rams are going to be like 50-50 when it comes to Blake Corum and Kyren Williams. Because like you're not going to send this guy out there. He's not going to return a punt, and then you're going to leave him on the field after he returns the punt. Like you can get into a pretty crazy like one snap rotation with these guys. And if they count that punt return as a snap, it makes me think that like you're going to get a really ugly backfield. So again, Kyren Williams is probably something in the range of like a mid to high end RB2, like good offense. They're going to run the football a lot. I don't know how much design receiving work he's going to get, especially because like, the guy I've been talking about, Jordan Whittington, I would not be surprised that like he is much more involved with the offense. They may have this larger rotation of weapons in this offense than like maybe we'd be anticipating. So again, like Blake Corum moves up from a guy that's probably like fringe draftability to absolutely should be drafted at this point, even for no other reason than like, to be a better chance to pay off as a lottery ticket than like your Trey Benson because of DeMercado. Maybe Marshawn Lloyd has a little bit more value than Blake Corum does. But that's just because like it's harder to figure out who is going to end up eating into Blake Corum. They do have Rodney Rivers there. Maybe Marshawn Lloyd. Maybe they bring somebody else into that backfield, but like maybe Marshawn Lloyd can eat into Josh Jacobs. Like this is a pretty good sign that like Blake Corum is just going to eat into Kyren Williams in one way, shape, or form. Zach Evans gets cut to go along with this, and Boston Scott gets cut. He goes to Pittsburgh. Him going to Pittsburgh may make me think that week one that Jaylen Warren may not be ready to go based off this. Boston Scott's one of those guys that play special teams. All right, Ravens. Keaton Mitchell starts the season on a pup. That's not surprising. The other thing that's a little surprising to me is, and I went and looked this up, so haven't heard anything about 5th round draft pick Rasheen Ali all offseason. He makes the roster. And it says like he's been having like injury concerns and stuff like that. So he makes the roster. Justice Hill's probably the cuff. Not a very good cuff. So like they're just rolling with Derrick Henry. Because of all the stuff that's going on, like maybe there's a little bit more value to Derrick Henry if they're just expecting that he's going to be old Derrick Henry at this place. Because again, like Justice Hill, Rasheen Ali are not guys that I would really expect to eat into Derrick Henry's workload. More of an issue that like if Lamar Jackson is not going to be using him in the passing game, there's a few other issues behind Derrick Henry, but like Keaton Mitchell not going on the pup, something to be expected. That doesn't change anything. And Rasheen Ali really making the roster, even though it's a little bit of a surprise, doesn't really change anything either there. Moving on to the Saints, Kendre Miller starts the season on IR, it looks like, IR for the hamstring. And then they did cut James Robinson. So again, a little bit of the redundancy when it comes down to these guys. So, league winning James Robinson season, not going to happen again this year. I'm moving on to the Texans. So I called this like British Brooks. He's a walk-on from North Carolina who had a lot of injuries. He made the roster. Special teams guy, a big thumper. Now, what makes this a little crazier is Dameon Pierce. He's still there. Didn't get cut, didn't get traded. And then Cam Akers coming off that Achilles. He didn't get cut. He didn't get traded. And I watched Cam Akers. Yeah, he looks really good. So maybe this is a little bit more of a running back by committee. I would not be surprised that like British Brooks is only going to be a special teams guy in this case, But Cam Akers, Dameon Pierce, maybe slight downgrade to Joe Mixon after this. Noah Brown gets cut, which is a little surprising on this one. And then other guys, Bobby Trees makes the roster in this case. So that's a little interesting. So now you're looking at like Mechie and Robert Woods is like the 4 and the 5 in that offense. Like this is a little interesting, expecting that he would have been cut or traded. He didn't get cut or traded. The guy that also got cut today was Ben Skowronek, another special teams guy with a lot of versatility, like wide receiver, fullback. Expected that he was going to make the roster. He didn't make the roster. So that's a little interesting with Bobby Tree staying. Jordan Addison news. This is more about like Jalen Nailor. I haven't heard anything about him having his suspension. I've been waiting on that. And then the injury, still tracking Jalen Nailor to have a little bit of value. And I should pull him up here. And the reason behind that is like, I don't know who else they're going to throw to after cutting Robert Tonyan and right there. After cutting Robert Tonyan and then TJ Hawkinson going on the pup. Like, so Jalen Nailor has a lot more value in what projects to be a higher volume passing offense with the Vikings, whether or not Jordan Addison is or is not injured. And I think that's about all I got for cuts. And when I got more news, I will come back on that one.